Welcome to another episode of Show Me Your RAIDLOG, where we talk with industry leaders about how they use RAIDLOGs and similar tools to help project managers succeed. I'm Kim Essendrup, co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour podcast and one of the founders of RAIDLOG.com. I've used RAIDLOGs for years to save broken projects and to keep my own projects from having to be saved, and I'm really excited to see how other leaders use theirs. With me today to talk RAIDLOGs is Joshua Nash. He's a seasoned project manager with over 15 years of experience in technology, including work in aerospace, SAAS, utility management, nonprofits, and high-end apparel. Josh is passionate about innovation and continuous learning. His journey has taken him across multiple continents and countries, fueling his love for travel and deep connection to the global community. He finds himself more grounded when abroad, embracing the diversity and richness of different cultures. With a commitment to fitness, having founded EnduroFit and philanthropic efforts supporting women and children in Africa through Blue Door Foundation, he considers himself a global citizen dedicated to making positive impacts worldwide. Really cool. Hi, Joshua. Welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
So glad that you're on the show. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing today from a project management perspective?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I currently work with Arc'teryx, an exciting and great Canadian company founded in North Vancouver in the late 80s. And I'm a product manager for them in the personalization team, working with the Salesforce MCP. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's a marketing cloud personalization tool. It provides real-time and relevant experiences, content, and recommendations for guests or customers.
Outstanding. Well, I'm really looking forward to asking you a few questions about one of my favorite project management tools, RAIDLOGs.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Let's start off at the beginning. How did you first learn about RAIDLOGs?
Yeah, well, I knew about them about 7 to 10 years ago. And to be honest, like we had kind of, on a lot of the projects I've been working on, used just traditional risk management plans. But, you know, the nice thing about a RAIDLOG, of course, is that it kind of expands into dependencies and it has a lot more aspects and components that are really essentially needed and often were missed. And of course, as we all know, dependencies are a massive part of projects that if they're missed, it's almost as painful as if you miss risks and well, really is. And so about 5 years ago, I started to use them more in my day-to-day and on the projects. And really found that, yeah, again, they really fill those gaps that the risk management plans would not fill. So, but I guess the challenge always is onboarding the rest of the team with them. So that's kind of been the journey in a sense of finding a RAIDLOG platform, whether it's with, you know, we've used Excel, we've used Smartsheets, and a lot of times it's just can be challenging to get the rest of the team to engage and use and view it and use it. You could have a beautiful RAIDLOG, and we've done that on some of our projects, but then sometimes they don't get reviewed as much as we'd like, and there's not that kind of there might be some pull, but there's no push, like with push notifications and such, right? So that's kind of been my experience with RAIDLOGs. But the value is tremendous, really, from where we have seen them implemented well, and then the team engaging and using them.
So you really see the difference between projects with and those without RAIDLOGs, huh?
Yeah, it's just kind of like having more awareness and visibility on things, and it's really like the team tracking and like having that accountability more or less, right? Instead of just hoping things go well. And as in our area right now, we work in personalization. We're putting up experimentation tests, A/B tests to, you know, site all the time. And there's little changes here and there that can occur, and then they can really impact an experiment. And that is something where I think a RAIDLOG can really help with, and it can really help mitigate that risk and reduce those chances of things going wrong. And if things do go wrong, you at least have a backup plan, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of that, do you have a time that you can tell us about when using a RAIDLOG maybe saved the project you were on, or maybe even better, helped keep you from having a project that needed to be saved?
I can't think of one like specifically that use, but I mean, we do a lot of different currently, like a turnover of experiments. But I would say like in starting this project, we've had some good areas of risk in that in terms of personalization on the web that have needed to be identified, and as well as dependencies and working with other teams, cross-functional teams. And the RAIDLOG has helped bring things together and kind of been that mesh and that glue. So we're having other cross-functional teams collaborate on our RAIDLOGs together. We then are able to tag them and share kind of some of the expected dependencies and also risks. And that really has helped move things forward for us and provide a better path to success.
Yeah, I can certainly see that collaboration can be really useful, especially if you don't have another framework or another methodology for really capturing and sharing those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now, when using a RAIDLOG, what is your biggest pain point, I wonder? What do you struggle with sometimes?
Yeah, I think ensuring that the RAIDLOGs are up to date, that's one area that's often a challenge, I think, because there's so many other things happening in your day-to-day in your project. You have, probably as a product manager, like 40 to 60% of your calendar is full with meetings. And then you have the Teams chats, right, which are ongoing. And those are equally as taxing and take up your energy and time, right? And then you have all the other documentation and work that you need to do, right, with communicating to stakeholders as well, but like just really having a clear cutout understanding of your deployments and things that you're working on, right? And so sometimes, unfortunately, the last thing you have on your list is to update your RAIDLOG, just because there's so many other things happening and you're almost being reactive in some cases, but like you're trying to do everything else. And then at the end of the day, you have your RAIDLOG fill out, and sometimes it's often missed because, again, like there's not that pull into the RAIDLOG a lot of times, right? Or the push where you're getting that notification that, hey, like, you need to, this is not valid, no longer valid, or this needs to be updated, right? So that's one of the things. And then I think sometimes like difficulty in keeping stakeholders informed and engaged, I think is also another issue. So we have a lot of different stakeholders across different business areas, and whether it's been in my experience previously to Arc'teryx or Lululemon, it's trying to bring them all into an understanding and clarity of things too. Oftentimes in businesses, there's not that expectation. They kind of want to have sometimes the least amount of information, but it has to be very concise, right? And sometimes the RAIDLOG can almost be a little too elaborate, and then it kind of disillusions them a little bit, and they just kind of want that one liner, right? And so that can be one of the challenges, I think, too. And then I think finally the potential discrepancies in understanding and communication, right? So for RAIDLOG, sometimes accuracy, like I mentioned before, keeping up to date, if things are not kept up to date and then someone does go back in there, including myself, then it's kind of, you have to follow up with it. And then there's that irrelevance, right? So that's also an important factor that must be considered as well. And it certainly is a bit of a pain point too, to make sure it's always like you cross your T's and dot your I's, so to speak.
Absolutely. And if I could, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about something you mentioned. So you talked about how with some stakeholders, I imagine, especially those in management, it's easy to get overwhelmed with all the information in a RAIDLOG. I mean, if you just take your RAIDLOG and give it to an executive, it's they can't even make heads or tails of it. So can you share a little bit about what techniques you use to manage that so that you can communicate with management or executives at an appropriate level without really overwhelming them?
I mean, a lot of times, to be honest, we will have our connects with them and then inform them as they need to know. I think that's valuable, and we don't necessarily bring the RAIDLOG in, but we bring the information that's in the RAIDLOG to those conversations. Because going through like a grid by, row by row kind of thing of they kind of might start losing attention more or less. So it's usually like finding ways to almost break it down to simplify it even further for them, and really just bringing interest to areas that we feel they need to understand.
It's like minimum viable RAIDLOG. for executives.
Basically, yeah, you kind of need like a column or a row that's like just for the, that sums up the information for them, right? In a sense.
All right, outstanding. Next, I'd really like to ask you about your thoughts and maybe your hopes around how artificial intelligence will impact or maybe already has impacted product management or project management, particularly around RAID management.
I'm one of those people who's quite optimistic about AI and its impact on many industries. I'm working in technology, of course. And I see there's great opportunity for things that it can do and advantages for those that use it and leverage it well. And I think in terms of RAID management, it has a great opportunity to revolutionize how things are done. Again, as we mentioned before, like keeping things up to date and also having things clear and not having discrepancies. I mean, I think we've all had a chance to use ChatGPT at this point. And if you put in like, perhaps an email that you're going to send out and you say, hey, just give this a refinement, you can see there's areas that you learn and it teaches you how things should be said, right? And it cuts out the things that maybe for years, I mean, there was ways I've said things for years that ChatGPT has showed me that's not the right way to say things. And I think RAIDLOG is no exception to that, right? There's certain ways we can do RAID logs or risks management, and that can be corrected in a sense by AI, I feel, because it's bringing in all that understanding information from across the web, from across, really human understanding, which is amazing. And it gives us essentially that upper hand and advantage, right? And I think that obviously it has a great way to streamline identification and tracking of risks too, right? So if you have a type of project, right, you put it in and then AI could essentially populate those areas for you, right? And then you can validate that, of course. I think there always needs to be that human validation with AI. You can't just let it take over and do everything. But there's, certainly that intended value that if you use it right, it can really kind of act as a catalyst for kind of moving your team forward in that direction, I think. And I've seen that with our team, of really helping identify risks and dependencies using AI to share what you have so far, and then adding some added value to that, and then even refining some of the risks you've already identified.
Yeah, I really like that. I feel like AI has the potential of being a really good assistant. But like you mentioned, it's the PM or project leader still has to use their judgment on it, and they have to approve it. It's not like you're just going to say, hey, go manage my work for me and I'll come back on Friday and see how things are going.
Totally.
Now, one other thing I'd like to ask you about, which I haven't yet, is when I look at your job title, it says product owner. Is that right?
Product manager.
Product manager. Sorry, product manager.
Yes.
Now, typically, when we talk about RAID logs, we're used to talking with project managers. So can you talk a little bit about that? Are you a product manager who's acting as a project manager and using a RAID log, or are you a project manager who finds value directly with using RAID logs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a current trend that's happening in the industry, especially within e-commerce, that project teams are moving to product mode. And the reason for that is, one, for better cross-functional collaboration. Typically, projects, they operate certainly from stakeholder interest and stakeholder engagement, but they're not really designed to engage with other cross-functional teams as much as, say, a product team would, because a product team effectively is more of a permanent, where project is more transient. It's like you implement the project, then you start another one, right? But for us, for example, in a Salesforce Marketing Cloud personalization tool, we're a product that we have a product that we manage. So we have moved to this mode, which makes more sense for our group. So my roles and responsibilities are more or less still as a project manager, but I also have more of a deeper interest and understanding of the product itself. And so that's kind of a layer as well that really changes how the role functions. And so we've been finding that this has already added some tremendous value for our teams, because there's kind of already that expectation for closer collaboration with cross-functional teams. We know that we're not turning over necessarily projects, but we're turning over initiatives, or we're turning over certain deployments within the product that we're working on. So we're doing infrastructure changes, we're doing experimentation, we're doing personalized content, things like that, and product recommendations. But they're all kind of like iterative as in Agile, it's iterations adding to the value to the product that we manage effectively.
All right. Well, we always had a feeling that RAID logs would be very useful in a little more of an agile or product management role. And it's really good to hear it from somebody who does it every day. All right. So to wrap up, I have one more question for you. Ready?
Okay.
All right. So what is your favorite tip or trick for using RAID logs that you can share with our viewers?
Yeah, sure. Well, I do use ChatGPT with building out RAIDLOG. So to build out my risks and dependencies and that for a project, I'll add those in to from what I have so far, kind of ones that I've summarized. And as I mentioned, I'll add those into, say, ChatGPT, and putting in the right prompt. I can then can put out, the right risks and dependencies, and it can really help me build out my RAIDLOG content. And I found this is much more efficient and more precise as it defines things for me, and it really helps add new value, I think, that and coverage to that. And then I'm not feeling it's so much of a task, but it's actually kind of fun to find out those things, because they're going to add value to the project, and they're going to help you move down the road. And it adds in that confidence level too, right? That okay, like I've verified this, and those things make sense, right? Using a chatbot. And yeah, so that's one of the tricks I use that I find quite useful. And then the other one I would say is setting up regular reminders for team members to review and update the RAIDLOG. That's certainly helpful as well. So, that's obviously, as I mentioned earlier, having that push and that pull into the RAIDLOG is really important. And I think having methods that bring people into it and start to use it really add a lot of value, of course, to the team. And so it's not all being funneled through one person, but everyone's kind of interacting with it.
Yeah, I love the idea of the reminders or the dates, because, there can be a lot of data in there, and you don't want to have to go through hundreds of items every time. And it's nice to say, what do I have to focus on right now? And as far as using the AI, can I ask you, how did you learn to create those prompts? Was that a trial and error thing? Did you read some articles? Was there a course? Can you tell me a little about how you learned how to do that?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of all. I read a lot of articles on it. Like I mentioned, very passionate about AI and how it can really help us as in technology moving forward, and as a product manager too, where there's a lot of different things to manage and things that were very tedious in the past, but then now it's like you can streamline a lot of those things. But then, yeah, trial and error has certainly been a big one. I think just finding what brings out better information, more precision in that. And, providing things like context is really important, of course, but then also like the type of language you want it to be in. So whether it's professional or candid, or, doing things like adding in even certain styles that you want it to copy, right? And you can add that to your prompt as well, right? So even a template, for example, right, of saying, follow this exact template, and then, it'll follow that. It's quite amazing in the sense of how it can learn and then follow. And now there's that learning feature, I think memories it's called in ChatGPT, which then you don't have to keep telling it to do the same thing. You can say, remember this, and then it will have that stored, and it will then bring that out again the next time you want to use it. So.
All right. Well, thanks for those tips. And boy, it is fun to just sit and play with it, and try to experiment and see what you can come up with. It's really interesting.
Yes.
Well, Joshua, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your product management experience, I should say. If our audience wants to find out more about what you're doing, how can they best do that?
Yeah, so you can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a kind of a blog there called The Mindful PM. I've been doing that for a few years. Very passionate about all that's happening in the technology space, and just ways that teams can work better together and collaborate together better. I also have a personal blog, joshnash.ca. And I love to be able to share more personal understandings and aspects, maybe that don't relate directly to work and that, but that's another area that I'm passionate about too. So avid writer, I love just sharing my thoughts and hearing what others have to say out there too. So it's kind of a fun community to be part of.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out for your blog again, because that's how we found you, and it's really great content. So we'll have a link in the notes. I highly recommend you go check it out, subscribe. Josh put some really good stuff out there.
Thank you.
So Joshua, thank you again so much for taking time to join us today and showing us your RAID log.
Absolutely a pleasure. Great to chat with you, Kim.
All right. Now, for our audience, if you'd like to step up your project or product management game, you can check out our new RAIDLOG application at raidlog.com. We're bringing the tried and true RAIDLOG into the 21st century with the only platform dedicated to giving project managers the tools that they need to succeed in project delivery and product delivery, starting with the RAIDLOG. Come check it out at raidlog.com.